What's happening? Renegade Culture's in the building.
Yo, how y'all doing out there? It's Renegade Culture coming at you.
What's going on,
what
man?
up?
What's going on, ear doctor?
Everything's good. How y'all out there?
New dashiki this week. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you know.
Definitely got a new dashiki. I'm wondering where he getting this hookup. You know, they had the rebellion and whatnot. We got to just check and see if any African markets or Asian shops were
Asian shops definitely.
Yeah, if any Asian shops were ransacked. You know what I'm saying? This dude got a new dashiki every week.
I see him with a big rock and hitting the storefront of like the Asian 5 and dime.
Yeah.
Grabbing up 400 of those.
It's funny because I saw this thing on the news. I think it was Chang's Fashions, and I see that somebody had broke in and whatnot. And I come to think of it, they had this shadowy figure that looked like Mr. Magoo, and now they look like Knocker.
You just saw a peanut head running away, and Kente shaking up and down on the shoulder.
Looking like he's doing long.
I like your Billy Ocean denim jacket though. That's pretty dope.
Yeah, Billy Ocean. That was cute. Wow. Anyway,
hey, so who we doing today?
Who we doing? I don't know what you talk about, man. Who's zooming who? What you into?
Yeah, but we got an extra special show. We're going to investigate like some of the killing, the assassination, and the government's involvement potentially in the killing of Tupac Shakur and other famous. Some of the stuff is not what some might consider conspiracy theory, but the government's continual targeting of black leaders. And our guest tonight is focused on Tupac Shakur and some other black leaders.
Yes. We're going to be talking to John Potash, who is a author of a couple serious books. We're going to talk to y'all about the books when we get back. But he's going to, he also has a documentary as well. But he's going to rap to us about some of his theories and some of his research around Tupac Shakur, whose born date will be coming up next week. I think the 16th.
I think he's June 16th.
Yes, I think, what is it, 1971? I think he would have been like 40.
Juneteenth is the 19th, brother.
Yes,
Let's
brother.
get it straight. If you're going to wear the dashiki, at least get a date right. You know what I'm saying?
Man. Come on.
I celebrate the whole month. I'll be forgetting how y'all get down.
This cat right here. Forget how we get down. Oh, okay. His cat right here. He didn't know we was free. But anyway. Anyway, he just threw me all the way the fuck off. I don't know what he was. But anyway, my man's birthday would have been June 16th. And I believe he'd have been 49 years old this year. So the show was timely. So we're going to get, some things about counterinsurgency, COINTELPRO, and what's going on today, because there's a lot of bullshit going on right now, too. As we know, especially here in Atlanta. You know, it's been off the chain. You got folks out there dancing with the National Guards. You got
you got a little voter suppression happening.
Oh yeah, voter suppression. Indeed, again, it's just like forget deja vu. This called how they do.
Yes,
you know how they do when you got how they do in the office or whatever. So
we got the cops apparently breaking into Bobby Rush's office and chilling. Might be getting that a little bit.
Man, it is kicking the Willie Bobo up in Bobby Rush's office. For those who don't know, Bobby Rush is a former Panther, former. What was he? Deputy Chief.
Defense.
Deputy Minister of Defense.
That's right.
Of Chicago. You know what I mean? And now he, later on he became a politician and he forgot that he was a part of the Black Panther Party. However, the pigs, 13 of them, decided to break into his office and they was like, look, we're going to turn our man Bobby Rush office into a pig's pen. You know what I mean? So they was kicking it, eating his popcorn. You know what I mean? They had their feet kicked up. They went to sleep. You know what I mean? They was chilling. So Bobby came in the next day and was like, oh, I'm appalled. They had a party without me in my spot. So, we're going to talk about that. Anyway, so it's a lot going on. Listening to Renegade Culture. We got Naka on the tables over there. Yes. With his stolen Asian dashiki. You know what I mean? Oh, excuse me, not stolen. His liberated.
Taking Juneteenth in. See, Juneteenth is like in August 4th or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
I think he changed the date on it as well.
I think he has.
Y'all done?
Malata ear doctor. You know what I'm saying? That's how we do.
The weird doctor.
Anyway,
that's how we do.
Renegade Culture, we right back after these messages.
Bam.
That's right.
They call us haters, but we saviors to you Negro kids. I'm burning all this bullshit down. Put that on everything. Put that on everything. I swear on everything. My black, white seeds and everything. Y'all niggas crying for what I write is everything. On everything. Fuck with me, homes. I'm showing everything. On everything. On everything. On everything. I put that on everything.
What's happening? Renegade Culture's in the building.
Word.
We're back again. I don't even know what episode this is. We've done so many.
It's episode like 850.
Somewhere probably.
We've been on for like 12 years now.
Oh man, you know, it feels like it. It feels like it. But also I want to remind folks to go to YouTube. We had a panel discussion the other day that was pretty on point. Organizing 101, building the people's army. You know, so if you want to check it out, go to YouTube. You know, the link's on there. Just type it in. Aside from that, we have another situation coming up soon. In the next couple of days, decentralization of police and public safety. Man, Dharuba Ben Wahad. So by the time you hear this, you'll probably be on board with us, checking it out. But anyway, tonight we have a special guest in the building. He is an author of several books. You know, he's out of the Baltimore area, excuse me. And he's been putting it in for a while. You know, we've been checking him out. John Potash is the author and producer of the book and film Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA's War on Musicians and Activists, and also the book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders, which is a book and film. John, what's happening, man? How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Kalanji and Kamal.
Hey, man. Hey, I see you got a good book collection behind you, too. I see me and you are the only two there on the show that read. So, you know what I'm saying? Kalanji just like, he's trying to block. He's like, you know, he's in his childhood room. So he's trying to block off his like toy selection.
Come on, I thought that was his wallpaper. I didn't know those was books.
Wow. You know, I'm not sure what he's doing back there.
No, you're talking about you, brother. But anyway, so John, Kamal's currently holed up in the library. So, you know, don't even trip. Anyway, good to have you on, man. We've been, you know, hearing about your stuff for quite a while. You know, you've been putting that work as a researcher. So we wanted to bring you on and talk to you. And, you know, Pac's birthday's coming up. What is it, like number 49? You know, so we figured it'd be a good time.
Yeah, actually, this is 49. Next year, 50, sure. 50 is the big one. Yeah.
So let's start a little bit with, like, you know, so there's a lot of folks, if the Black community has been split, right, on what happened with Tupac in terms of his assassination and or killing, right? Some folks are squarely in the camp that Tupac was targeted by the police and federal authorities, FBI in particular, for assassination. And some were just like, hey, Pac got killed because he got caught up in gang life, right? So how do you how do you dispel, well, what do you have in terms of information to start off with that would suggest that the FBI would have been interested in Tupac in the first place, right? To target him for an assassination.
Yeah, well, my first book, I said I thought it was the FBI, but in my second book, I clearly found the reasons why it was the CIA also involved. And so I'll start with the fact that by the time Tupac was 17 years old, I talked to his business manager, Watani Tayahimba, who was the founding member of the New African People's Organization and was a former Los Angeles Black Panther. And Watani said that Tupac was the youngest ever elected chairman of the New African Panthers. And they were active in 8 to 10 cities around the country. And they were like the young adult section of the New African People's Organization. And they were trying to replicate the original Black Panthers just without, you know, making the same mistakes, is the way Tupac and others put it. And so he was already a national Black leader before he even became a rapper. So when he started to add wealth and fame and, you know, influence to that national Black leadership, it made him ever more dangerous. And the more, you know, wealth and fame and influence he had, the more sophisticated the targeting became. And so I document, you know, in my book and films, the fact that there were, you know, an estimated at least 6 attempts to kill him by U.S. intelligence before they actually succeeded even. And so the first time was, supposedly he was arrested supposedly for jaywalking, and they choked him unconscious, beat his head against the curb. And I showed 2 examples how people died in police custody with those means, with those police behaviors. And this is for jaywalking. This is, it's obviously it was right after, it was several days after his song Trapped had a worldwide MTV release. All right. So then the next time there was a drive-by on his limousine as he was going from his premiere of the movie Juice, which was, a major film release, from the premiere to the party. There was a drive-by on his limousine. I showed the examples of undercover police doing a drive-by in that area before when a witness to a major police brutality case. And then there's a situation at the Marin City Festival, the 50th anniversary of the Marin City Fest. And at that event, people shot at him for no reason, unprovoked, in front of police officers, and then tried to beat him unconscious. He basically crawled under a police car to save himself. And this was all 3 of these incidents were while Richard Held was the supervisor, FBI supervisor for the area. Now, Richard Held had been involved in targeting Tupac's godfather, which was, Geronimo Pratt. And then Richard Held further played a major part in organizing the infiltration of Geronimo Pratt's legal defense to stop it from being successful. Tupac, meanwhile, was organizing benefits for his godfather, Geronimo Pratt, musical benefits, rap benefits at that time. Tupac was also, consulting with Huey Newton before he died. He was consulting with Geronimo, when he was heading the New African Panthers. So he was a major threat, to the authorities. By the time, by 1991 of the Marin Fest, when he was targeted a 3rd time. Then you have him getting even bigger, so he's going from a gold record to a platinum record, and in these major motion pictures, being more and more influential. And so then he goes to Atlanta, and police, according to eyewitnesses, he just rolled down his window, said, "What's going on?" When police were beating up a black motorist right in front of him. They immediately, 3 white cops immediately ran over to his car, smashed, and this is according to eyewitnesses I interviewed. Both Talia Himba talked about this, and Tupac's cousin told me this, who was an eyewitness. Smashed the window of his car with the butt of their gun and shot at him. He merely rolled out the back of his car, grabbed a security guard's gun behind him, and shot back in self-defense. So here he is, and these are white witnesses that were watching, even described it. Looked like a police mob, like a white mob attacking a black motorist, is the way they described the way they ran at Tupac's car. So Tupac then grabs the gun, shoots back in self-defense, hits them in the butt and the leg, and gets off. Shooting white police officers and getting off of it. Now, how did he get off it? The reason they got off of it is because it came out that they had grabbed, they had stolen guns from the evidence locker. Okay, so they used stolen guns, and they called those guns, in a separate Tupac trial, the New York trial, they got Michael Warren, his lawyer, got them to admit that these are, what you call throwaway guns. When you shoot someone, for no reason, you just throw it away so it doesn't get traced back to you. So
let me cut in for a second, because I want to skip forward just a little bit. But at the time of Tupac's, and again, I'm trying to set the scene before we get really into maybe who are some of the figures. But what I'm curious about too, though, is in terms of playing devil's advocate or whatever. But at the time when Tupac was killed / assassinated, and he was, in Suge Knight's camp, and he was. It seemed to be, because I used to be a member of the Malcolm X grassroots movement and the African People's Organization. It seemed that Tupac was moving away from, or not as involved in political activity. So why do you think at the time that he was assassinated, more or less, that he was still or thought of to be a threat, when maybe his political activity seemed to be diminishing, in my sort of opinion, and not necessarily on the ascension in terms of, getting more politicized. Obviously, he was already a politicized person, but expressing that politics and so forth like that.
Yeah, well, what he was doing, his politics, part of his political plan, his thug life plan was the plan that he created with Mutulu Shakur, who was, of course, a longtime political prisoner, great activist, used acupuncture to solve addictions in the Bronx. Anyway, and he started the Republic of New Africa. So Tupac came up with this plan. It was to pretend to be a gangster in order to appeal to gangs and politicize them. And so he was introducing the leaders of Bloods and Crips at gang truce picnics and getting them to call peace truces and turn on to activism and stop drug dealing as much as possible. So this peace truce movement spread throughout the country to the point that the Latin Kings, the largest gang in New York, was really inspired to join it, and they gave up drug dealing. And I talked to King Tone, Antonio Fernandez, who was the head of Latin Kings, and he said he had joined the movement there, and articles came out about it. Two professors in New York wrote a book about it. They changed their names to Almighty Latin King and Queen Nation. This is a 3,000 strong gang that stopped drug dealing. And so in my book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, which I turned into a film, as you can see in the poster behind me, I have Catherine Austin Fitts describing why this is so important. She says that basically cash going into stock markets and the stocks of these companies, of these multinational companies, are most of this cash is laundered money when that comes from drug dealing. So the drug dealing cash is then laundered. It's laundered through many companies, including lots of fast food companies. That cash in lots of banks, it's estimated, United Nations expert estimated that the United States launders between $500 billion and $1 trillion a year. And most of that's drug money. And so all that laundered money can be multiplied by 20 or 30 times in the amount of value it raises for those stocks. And that's the way it works. So she says several drug dealers just on the street each day in a year, they could raise stock values, by millions of dollars, believe it or not. So here he's getting 3,000 people, gang members to stop drug dealing. And we're talking, so that alone, much less all the other gangs across the country that were joining this gang peace truce movement and stopping drug dealing, was costing the banks and the other laundering companies billions and billions. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And so that was a major threat to them and their profits.
Okay. Let's stop here. We're gonna take a break. So I just want to make two minor corrections. One is Watani was a member of RAM, but he wasn't a member of the Black Panther Party.
No, it was the RAM-based Black Panthers. RAM had their own version of the Black Panthers. It wasn't the same Black Panther Party that Hugh Newton was part of, but it was the RAM-based Black Panthers. Yes.
And two, the make sure Mutulu
Shakur.
Say it again. The Republic of New Africa was started obviously in '68 by the Milton brothers, and of course Mutulu joined the.
But Mutulu Shakur was part of the he was part of the revolutionary. I mean
Republic of New Africa. I just want to be clear though, he didn't start it, but he was part.
Okay, he was just a founder.
He joined at age 14.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But we're gonna come back because we want to get deeper into now. When we come back, who actually killed Tupac? We're laying out the reasons why. Who killed Tupac? And the evidence that you have to show that. Right. Renegade Culture.
Yes.
We headed for the times of the 9, watch out 6. Sun cycle on the rise, moon cycle out the mix. Living on this planet of the snakes and the crucifix. Pardon yourself as I arc my way through, marching with my A-boom boom, making my debut. Like great balls of fire, nothing to save you in these replenishing times. I honor my dead, making my ancestors proud when it's off with your head.
Renegade Culture in the building. You just heard Wrath of the Siafu, which produced by the FTP movement. If you haven't heard Wrath of the Siafu, go to YouTube, Wrath of the Siafu. It has 11 of the dopest MCs you want to hear and see. And, it's fire, so make sure you check it out. We're sitting here with John Potash here today. And John's laying out the revolutionary history of Tupac Shakur and also info on his assassination and you know, we want to get down to the nitty gritty. John, I know that both of your books, the titles are like 5 miles long. Can you can you lay the titles out? Because I tried to lay it out. And it was like, man, you named everybody in the history of music. Beethoven.
Yeah, it's just so that people can understand what it's about, because there's so much censorship of my books that when people see the subtitle, at least they know what it's about without people distorting it, which happens a lot. But the subtitle of the first book is, you know, it's the FBI war on Tupac Shakur and black leaders, and the subtitle is U.S. Intelligence's murderous targeting of Tupac, MLK, Malcolm, Panthers, Hendrix, Marley, rappers, and linked ethnic leftists. And it's also, of course, that people can, if they do a search for someone, they can find the book too. You know, the words can bring it up. And for Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the subtitle is the CIA's murderous targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lennon, Cobain, Tupac, and other activists.
Now, hold it. Now, you're saying the U.S. government was involved in the killing of Bob Marley and Jimi Hendrix?
Yes.
I got to hear about the Jimi Hendrix thing. I need to do a quick cut to Jimmy. Why was the government involved in Jimi Hendrix's killing? And again, I guess it's the common stories, right? He died, I guess after drug use or drinking and vomited, and they said he choked on his vomit. At least that's the public story. What are you saying happened?
Yeah, well, he wasn't political at first. When Black Panthers talked to him, he wasn't interested in supporting them at first. But then in 1968, with Martin Luther King's assassination, he got really depressed and really political, and then he started dedicating his last album to the Black Panthers. He did interviews talking about why you need the Black Panthers, and he started getting very political. He talked to Bob Dylan about forming a peace movement and trying to start an anti-war movement with Dylan. And, you know, and they were mutual friends. Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones asked if him and John Lennon wanted to form a supergroup. And Brian Jones was a founder of the Rolling Stones and was the most talented musician, and was also, like him and Jagger, were the most political of the Rolling Stones. And John Lennon, of course, was the most political of the Beatles. And so he was a threat in a number of ways at that point when he started getting so political. And so when he died, it was very similar to Tupac in the sense that they both had managers that were placed in their lives to control them. Now, what Tiny Tayimba said, when when Suge Knight and Dave Kenner, Dave Kenner was the real owner of Death Row Records, the lawyer, the white Jewish mob lawyer. He basically those two controlled Death Row Records. They came in and they tried to get Tupac to join them, consistently, very early. And what Tiny Tayimba told me, he didn't understand why they're offering him so much money for a single and things like that. And then, of course, he realized that it was about controlling Tupac, the same way Mike Jeffrey, a former British MI6 agent, and all evidence shows he wasn't former. He continued to be MI6, British CIA, and he completely tried to control Jimi Hendrix. And within 48 hours of firing Mike Jeffrey, he died, Hendrix. And all that, there's so much foul play around his death. And the best evidence is that, he actually was murdered. And because he was becoming so political, and because he was, finally getting rid of the person controlling him, Mike Jeffrey. I mean, he was actually, Jeffrey had him kidnapped by mafia for several days, then pretended to get him free by, stronger mafia, he said. And that was like just another version of trying to control him, because he was trying to fire Mike Jeffrey for so long.
Okay, so are you suggesting that playing what we call crackers advocate? Are you suggesting that that once these Black African American individuals reach a certain status and they have those politics, then the state pretty much hones in on them and are interested in eliminating the threat or diminishing the threat?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and Bob Marley, I mean, with Marley, I talked to Black Panther Lilu Lee, who did the great film All Power to the People, and he was a former, half Asian, half Black Panther who went to cinematography, won awards for cinematography, and he was on the film team for doing, the film about Bob Marley's famous concert right before the elections. And that concert was going to be considered, you know, when he did that to promote the socialist leader of, you know, of Jamaica at the time, who was running against a guy who the CIA pushed. And so right before the concert, first there was a shooting at Bob Marley's house. Marley was shot. His wife was shot. His manager, Don Taylor, was shot. And so the president, who was friendly with, got him, you know, hold him up in an encampment, a Rasta encampment, to keep him safer. And so Lee said that when he went into that encampment to film him, there was a new guy on his film team. And that new guy, he didn't think much of him at first, but then he gave Bob Marley some gift shoes. And so Bob Marley tried on the boots, these gift boots, because that's like just the custom when you're Rasta custom is to try on a gift immediately if you're giving it to it. And he got jabbed in the toe by some kind of sharp metal object. And he didn't think, no one thought anything much of it at first, but a month or two later when he was playing soccer, that toe got crushed, and they found because it was filled with cancer. And so I found the CIA documents that they were working on, you know, these hyper metastasizing chemicals, you know, basically these chemicals that can cause cancer very fast. And they perfected that actually. And so I believe, you know, the thinking is that they actually got him, you know, after trying to kill him with bullets. And, you know, and some of the guys that were involved in shooting Bob Marley were even caught by some of the Rastas, and they admitted, they said the CIA paid us to try to kill Bob Marley. So then with the stabbing in the toe, he did get cancer in the toe. It spread throughout his body, and of course he died young. And so it came out that that guy who got into that you know, film team was actually a CIA member, and he was actually the son of the CIA director's son. And so I have all that in my book about that. But yeah, that's the way it was done.
I know that you also talked about Paul Robeson in your book.
Oh yeah.
A lot of folks aren't familiar with Paul Robeson from a political point of view. And I want you to do two things. I want you to talk about the importance of Paul Robeson as far as from your research in the Black community and also in the human rights community. And
I mean, Paul Robeson's probably one of those amazing men in world history. I mean, guy could speak over 20 languages. He got a Columbia University law degree at a time when, you know, he was probably the only Black person allowed in Columbia University Law School. You know, he was an amazing athlete, you know, top football player, top lacrosse player, and considered really one of the best singers in the world, if not the best singer in the world. Just an amazing man. And, you know, of course, in films, and he was a very serious activist, beloved by unions all across the, you know, the country, beloved by, you know, activists across the world. And he fought for anti-lynching legislation. He fought for all kinds of civil rights, you know, did all kinds of civil rights work, but really talked and spoke and sung for all kinds of activist causes for everybody, for, you know, workers around the world and oppressed peoples around the world. They took away his passport at different times, you know. And so the worst thing they did, of course, which is one of the first, you know, major activists I talk about that was targeted with LSD, was they dosed his drinks when he was at a hotel in Russia about 3 weeks before he was going to meet with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. It was 1961, and they gave him a massive dose of either LSD or a super psychedelic called, I think it was DMT or BZ, I'm sorry. But they gave him this super psychedelic, and this is according to his son, Paul Robeson Jr., who was an adult at that time. And so Paul Robeson Sr. thought he was losing his mind, you know, because he didn't know about LSD at that time. And so he called his family. Paul Robeson Jr. went over there to Russia to see what was going on. Paul Robeson Jr. got dosed with that super psychedelic, but he was lucky just to take a little sip of the drink, so he wasn't dosed as badly. And but they did it to Paul Robeson again and again, and finally they convinced his wife to have him admitted to a hospital, mental health hospital. At that point, they gave him over 50 doses of electroconvulsive shock treatment at overly high doses, and ruined his mind, sadly enough. And he didn't want to be remembered that way, beyond his normal, really, brilliant self. And so he became a recluse after that. So they effectively shut him down. It's very sad. But that's just some of the ways that the CIA's MK Ultra program targeted,
Right.
the great activists. And so my
It,
book, Drugs as Weapons, talks a lot about that targeting.
explain MK Ultra for the folks who, the first time they're coming on the show, or they're unfamiliar with the CIA's dirty tricks. But also, I want you to touch on, along with Paul Robeson, you had folks like Fidel Castro who were targeted as well with this whole MK Ultra program. Can you kind of give us a?
Sure. Yeah, well, of course they tried to assassinate. I mean, even the U.S. Senate Church Committee admitted they tried to assassinate Fidel Castro at least a dozen times, but it was really closer to 50 to 100 times they tried to assassinate him in different ways. But they also targeted him. I mean, they had in their documents, in the CIA documents, this came out on an ABC newscast at one point, that in the CIA documents they had Fidel Castro and Che Guevara on their acid hit list, their LSD hit list. They were going to try to aerosolize LSD and spray it on them and make them, trip and either think they're losing their minds or hurt their minds, hurt their best thinking. Because a lot of the evidence shows that psychedelics can hurt our best thinking. Used again and again, it can really start to erode our best thinking. It can really spark some feelings of psychosis, and sometimes they can last those feelings of psychosis. And the best evidence is, I feel like I hurt my mind with just a half dozen trips in my first year of college, and thankfully got away from it. Would never go back to it. But I've counseled. I do counseling for a living, and started with drug counseling. I've been doing it for 30 years, but my first 8 years were drug counseling, then mental health counseling in general, plus some addictions counseling. And I've seen too many people, with that tried too much LSD that just really were, kind of out there losing their minds a bit, sadly enough. And so MK Ultra was the use of drugs, according to their own documents, use of drugs as unconventional warfare. Now, when we think of warfare, we think on foreign battlefields, but according to their documents and according to all the people they targeted, the U.S. and England, activists, left-wing activists in the U.S. and England were their targets, was their warfare. And Paul Robeson was one of those targets, and a number of other people, of course, I have in my book were other targets. Now, they targeted a lot of activists in general, but they particularly targeted musicians, I argue, because the CIA wants to control our hearts and minds. They know they can't control us all physically because we so outnumber them, the 99%. So they try to control our hearts and minds through propaganda, but they also try to control our musicians and manipulate our musicians to promote things they want them to promote. And then when they start to get too political, they try to neutralize them. Either they try to scare them into submission, or they kill them if they're not, if they don't stop doing their activism. And that's why I show, I believe they targeted people like Tupac, of course, but Jimi Hendrix also, John Lennon, Kurt Cobain. They killed Brian Jones. I I have people on tape saying that he was, one of the people that killed Brian Jones admitted he did it on his deathbed, drowned him. And he was the founder of the Rolling Stones. They neutralized Mick Jagger with death threats and and murder attempts. And other great musicians and other great activists. Of course, they targeted the Black Panthers and the Students for a Democratic Society, which was the largest anti-war movement in the country. In 1969, it was about 100,000 strong.
We have to go to a quick break, but when we come back, you spark some interesting things in the latter part of the convo. We know that there's an uprising going on right now across the country, across the world. And there are a number of artists who are, the line is being drawn in the sand. You know what I mean? The line of demarcation is being drawn, and some artists are over here, some artists over there, and some artists believe that there's neutrals in war, which we know they're not. So we want to get into that particular aspect, and also some of the things that you've seen or witnessed on the streets that you can kind of tie back to some of your research with these activists and artists.
Sure.
I wanted to also add quickly, I'm not sure if you have an opinion on this, that, there's a lot of folks post-Ferguson who were involved, young people, and there's been speculation that some of their deaths were not just random, unrelated deaths, but somehow tied to their activity as organizers and activists. Well, I don't want you to answer now, but I want to come back and ask about that. And
Yeah,
obviously, and we want to finish up too on Tupac and what actually happened to him, I think. So, so we're going to come back in a second. Renegade Culture.
No doubt.
There's no feeling like the true knowledge of yourself. With Coogee Chagalia shots from the top shelf. You know you're winning when you're raising all your children right. I see my little girl locks long, grinning bright. I'm a gorilla at it. Nigga, here's the ratchet. Open my mouth, hollow tip, spit out, they get it. Give a fuck what they think, Geronimo Pratchett. A G jogger, that G Baba Supreme Cotta. Yes.
Renegade Culture back at you. You know what I mean? Just heard my man Mike Flo, the DJ for Dead Prez and MC out of Chicago as well. And you can also catch him in the Wrath of Siafu, that shameless plug right there for the FTP movement, which is just
very shameless indeed. But
yes, I mean 16 years, just had a 16-year commemoration, so I gotta shout it out. You
were an MC, right? For briefly.
Me?
Yeah.
Absolutely, of course.
I noticed nobody ever targeted you, but that's another discussion.
Okay, all right.
They were like, this kid ain't got no talent. He ain't going nowhere. So
oh, man, yes. Red Skeleton, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, John, what's happening, man? You all right over there?
Well, Kamali, they did target Kalonji because I saw the video of him in Aruba getting attacked by the new Black Panther Party. That's what
true.
Yeah.
Hey, that's an actual fact. You said they did target, and I'm glad
not because of his musical talent. Let's just be clear about that.
Hey, but I'm glad you put in perspective. Who sponsored the attack.
But they, so it's interesting because that's actually how Kalonji contacted me this time, is because I just posted something. I posted that video of him in Daruba giving that press conference, because what seems to be happening is the police are kind of anointing these fake, Black leaders of some in Columbus, Ohio. They found that some group called themselves Black Freedom. They first became a group about 2 or 3 days before the protest started. And all of a sudden the police are saying, we're going to talk to Black Freedom as the organizers of the, marches, and all the other, long-standing Black organizations in Columbus, right? Who are these people? These people, no one knows who they are. No one knows these people. Yeah. And so the new Black Panther Party, obviously, I had a picture of one of the new Black Panther Party arm in arm with one of the police chiefs in Atlanta. It was very bizarre. And of course, we know what happened with Kalonji, but if your listeners don't know, they tried to kill one of the Black Panther 21, Daruba Bin Wadhad and Kalonji, when they tried to confront the leadership of the new Black Panther Party. Now they've left messages on my phone. They've tried to friend me on Facebook and send me things and invite me to things, and I'm not interested, of course, because they scare me. Former Black Panther George Edwards, who Kathleen Cleaver introduced me to, was a New Haven Black Panther leader. He's in my book and film, but he said that he worked hard to try to transform the leader of the new Black Panther Party, and he feels like he got really far, and that he was starting to really adopt the original Black Panthers platform and all that, and then he was murdered. And who becomes the new leader? Malik Shabazz, and with his baggage and with his murderous actions, obviously, against Daruba and Kalonji and others. And so but anyway, so back to what you were saying about some people in Black Lives Matter, and people are revealing things about this police brutality. Person, just as an example, the person that filmed Eric Garner getting murdered was murdered himself later. Is my understanding. That's what I heard about him. The person that filmed it, on his camera, or was he jailed?
He was in prison. He was in jail.
I'm sorry, he was in jail. He was in prison.
I think the news is that he just recently got out of prison after several years. Yeah,
he was in prison, on trumped up charges, I'm sure. And then that's kind of that's basically what they're doing, is they're targeting who they need to target, in the movement in different places, and annoying people who really, are pseudo activists, and that's the sad part of it. And the good part of it is that so many people are getting involved. In the Baltimore March, it was probably 70 or 80% white, and there was thousands marching, in one of the Baltimore marches that I was involved in, and some many great activists around the city were involved, and luckily there was no violence in Baltimore in terms of police brutality that I saw. But in other cities, the police brutality was terrible. We're hearing all kinds of horrible things happening in New York, of course, and all over. People getting shot in the eyes with rubber bullets. They're shooting, journalists even too with rubber bullets. It's some awful stuff they're doing. So
yeah.
Right.
So let's. Oh, no, I was going to say quick. So I want to circle back around to Tupac.
Sure.
Because I want to talk about his actual death and so forth. So again, I think the public story, what folks for the most part have seen, or from some of these crime drama shows have pieced together, that there's a feud in terms of gang warfare. Tupac was in Vegas. He potentially participated in beating one gang member up, and that gang member supposedly or allegedly sought revenge, and hence the sort of the drive-by shooting that led to Tupac's assassination. So that's the public story that most people either believe and or have heard of. And then there's also these the background stories like, oh, but maybe he was targeted, or maybe a cop was involved or something like that. Could you lay out who you think killed Tupac? You've talked about why, but who you think was responsible for Tupac's killing? Yeah.
So by that point, so he had a 2-record deal, or I'm sorry, a 3 CD deal. The contract called for 3 CDs with Death Row Records. When he did a double CD and then he came out with this, the 3rd CD, he got into literally physical fight with Suge Knight, saying, "I've done my contract, and I'm leaving Death Row." He'd already started his new record company, Euthanasia. He had former Black Panther Yasmin Fula heading his new record company, Euthanasia, and she was involved. Him and Afeni were involved in his new film company that he had started. He was getting tons of film offers to do tons of new movies, and he was breaking from Death Row. He was trying to get away from Death Row. He had already gotten a new apartment. He was getting out of his Death Row apartment. He was he took home tons of his masters that he was working on songs, and Dave Kenner ordered him to bring him back. He got into a fight with Dave Kenner over that, but that was his signal. He had fired Dave Kenner as his lawyer, so he was getting away from Death Row. And so a few days before he was supposed to go to Las Vegas, his one of his bodyguards, Kevin Hackey, I argue, turned. He was working for the FBI undercover, Kevin Hackey, and he was a police officer, and he was moonlighting for Death Row Records. Now I showed the evidence that he turned on the FBI, and he warned Tupac not to go to Vegas. And Tupac first agreed with him. He says he won't go to Vegas, and Hackey convinced him to go to Atlanta to be with his Tiny Himba and his his extended Black Panther family, basically. But a judge, he had a court case where someone in his car had marijuana on him. He got caught with that. That could have violated his parole. The judge just said, well, you seem to be such an amazing individual after reading a kind of bio of him in a report that was written about him. They said, I'm just going to go by what your lawyer requested, and I'm just going to make you do a benefit concert. And that's it. But the benefit concert was that night when he was killed. And that was at Club 666 or 663 or whatever it was, 662. And that was right after the Mike Tyson fight. But even though, he was friends with Mike Tyson and wanted to see him, he was not going to go to that Tyson fight because he was so worried because he had been warned. Hackey was fired immediately when Suge Knight and Dave Kenner found, Reggie Wright Jr. found that, he had told Tupac not to go to Vegas. They immediately fired Hackey. They ordered all the guards who were, police officers not to carry guns that night. They gave them cell phones that didn't work. They, and so in Vegas, what happened was the top crime reporter in Vegas, Kathy Scott, said the police committed so many bizarre things. They did so many bizarre things in investigating that it was she's never seen anything like it. It's supposed to be the one of the biggest murders in Vegas history, and they're not gathering, detaining all the witnesses. They're not collecting all the evidence. They're not using a copter to investigate. Russell Poole ends up investigating. He's a Los Angeles police detective who just happened to start investigating, and he found that, he ended up concluding that that his fellow police officers murdered Tupac, and they said he was assigned to the Biggie Smalls investigation. They said they murdered Biggie as to take the eyes off of their real murder of Tupac, okay? Just to make it look like an East Coast, West Coast conflict that caused the murders.
So wait a minute. You're saying that they killed Biggie to cover up. You're saying are you saying the CIA and or FBI killed Biggie to cover up the Tupac or to distract from the Tupac killing?
Yes, to make it look like an East Coast, West Coast rivalry murders. Because the real important murder was Tupac because of his incredible, activist leadership and what he was planning to doing when he left death row. He was already telling people what he was going to do. He was already organizing with Sonika Shakur. Sonika Shakur is a former, Crips gang leader. It used to be called Monster Cody Scott, the famous book Monster and all. So he was already organizing with Sonika. Sonika told me all about this. Did a long interview with long talk with Sonika, and we had letters back and forth. And Sonika, and they planned on creating community centers and doing other things, but part of it was the gang peace truce movement that was going to take tons of drugs off the streets and really hurt really affect billions and billions of dollars of profits for the money laundering banks and the other companies that were money laundering. And we're talking about these banks have been caught laundering hundreds of billions of dollars a year. This has come out in the newspapers about that. HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, etc. And Tupac was seriously putting a dent into that with his gang peace truce movement. So besides trying to politicize other rappers and having a real politicizing gangs in general and all that, just gangs and the populace in general. I mean, yeah.
Let me ask you this, John, sort of off subject, because I know that some of our listeners, when they see this, they're gonna be like, okay, who is this white dude that's talking about Tupac and Bob Marley and hip hop and Paul Robeson, so on and so forth. For the listeners, what drove you what made you decide to get into this particular, coming from this particular angle?
Well, my grandfather was a Marxist lawyer who had represented Black Panthers in New York, and had gotten off some other. There's a lot of different factions of Black Panthers in New York. He got off some of them in a certain area of New York, and he was. And so my grandfather politicized me a bit, so I became an activist after having a drug problem in the beginning of college, as I mentioned. And so I started working. My first job was as an addictions counselor right out of college. And so I started seeing what was going on with all the corruption and with drugs, and people telling me that the government's the biggest dealer of drugs and all that, and researching it that way. I was working on the book Drugs as Weapons Against Us, starting in 1989 when I was doing this drug addictions counseling. And then when someone told me, well, my father was a Black Panther killed by the police, I took a special interest in the Panthers, researching them and ran into what was going on with the New York Black Panthers and what was going on with Tupac. So I took just a diversion from the Drugs as Weapons Against Us book, and because I called Michael Tarif Warren, Tupac's New York trial lawyer, and said, it looks like the FBI is targeting him like his Black Panther family, and no one, he says, yes, and no one's writing about it. And so I'm really glad you want to write an article on this. So he gave me a 2-hour interview and told me all about, what his agreement with me that, that there appeared to be FBI targeting of him. I came out with an article in spring of 1995 before Tupac died on what looked like a Latter-day COINTELPRO targeting of, but none of the white activist media they just wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't take it on. The only one that seemed like they might be interested was Covert Action Quarterly, but there was an infiltrator of the magazine who kept me from giving it to the main editors, and he kept saying, "Oh, we all turned it down," and he was let go after that. This guy, but either way, finally, when Covert Action Quarterly found out about my original article and I expanded that, they published it in 1998. And so, you know, that's just basically what got me into it. And then, of course, I thought, okay, well, Tupac is such a major, important figure. And to me, whether black or white's not the issue. His issue is he had my politics. We had the same politics. You know, he was a socialist, you could say, or you know, Marxist in some sense. And I thought through him, I could get, you know, a real history of the great, you know, black activist, you know, movements that no one's talking about. Through him, people would start, you know, to listen and actually read about the Black Panthers more. And a lot of activists have told me that their kids wouldn't read about the Panthers until I wrote that, you know, they read my Tupac book.
Well, I'm interested in this part. Like, so, what do you, if Tupac wasn't assassinated, let's say, that's, you know, it's hard to predict what history would have given us and so forth, as with any either great leader or artist or so forth. But if Tupac wasn't assassinated, I'm interested in at least in your opinion, based on your interviews that you've done and folks you've talked to, what do you think he would have been 20 years, 25 years post his assassination in terms of either his work or his relevance to movement activity?
Yeah, I mean, I think he would have had, you know, the kind of influence that the greats, like, you know, believe it or not, I think Malcolm X, Martin Luther King had, because because of the way he brought so much other kinds of talent into it, besides just the brilliant mind for the politics, but also the passion with the art, you know, and the music and the film. He just would have been that influential, I believe. And you were granted, you know, Quincy Jones, when he came out with that book, you know, about Tupac through Vibe, you know, publishing, he said, you know, when Malcolm X was 25, he was still just you know, a street hustler, and when Martin Luther King was 25, he was just trying to be you know, a preacher. And here Tupac he was only 25, and he was already so influential and so political. And, you know, and he would have risen to even greater heights than he already did at the age of 25.
We have a couple minutes left before we go to our outro. I wanted to, you know, we kind of danced a little bit on what's going on today with the whole uprising, right? And you've researched so many different influential entertainers. You know, some of them we're not going to be able to talk about during this particular, you know, in a short time. Mm-hmm. But with what's going on today,
well, I think the sad thing, the only negative part of Tupac is that people don't realize that he was sobering up at the very end of his life. He was giving up drugs and alcohol. People like Russell Simmons say he saw him at a party and everybody's smoking weed and drinking, and Tupac was the only one that wasn't touching alcohol or weed at all. And the sad thing is, and through my counseling, I'm seeing mothers crying to me about their kids that are in their early 20s, and someone's putting crap in their weed. They're putting stuff in their weed that's making them lose their mind. It's either the spice or K2 or some other thing they're dosing them with in their weed that's making people lose their minds, particularly the black community. It's for some reason, you know, this is what U.S. intelligence does. This is part of MK Ultra. MK Ultra is still happening, just under different names. It's obvious. And the sad thing is that some of these rappers are pushing things like Marley, which was used, you know, Molly's ecstasy, and that was used by the head of chemical warfare in South Africa against the black communities of South Africa. He was caught in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The head of chemical warfare, Walter Basson's assistant, said, you know, Basson ordered me to manufacture a ton of ecstasy, and he was caught, and Basson was caught, you know, delivering it to the black communities for dealers to distribute there. So that's the sad thing. That's the sad part of it. But you know, I think they're using all kinds of means to attack all of us with drugs still, and all kinds of horrible other, you know, forms of repression. And we just have to be as creative and smart about it, like, you know, like you do with, you know, unveiling fake leadership, like you did, Kalonji, you and Daruba did, in the best ways we can, you know, and learn what's going on and expose it, and just keep pushing for the solidarity with the real activists.
Definitely, you know, a lot of heavy words and work for one show. I don't know how, you know, your documentary, you I mean, I don't know why it's like 19, why it's not like 19 hours, because of the fact that you have so much information, and we just did a quick hour. You know what I mean?
Thanks.
But
yeah, Drugs as Weapons Against Us did get nominated for an Africa Movie Academy Award for Diaspora documentary. So I was really happy about that. So some people are paying attention for sure.
Now this documentary is the one that came out in 2018, or?
Yeah, 2019, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA War on Musicians and Activists. I finally cut down the subtitle a little bit, you know.
Yeah, that shit, you can tell you've been around some old school black folks, because that shit was like 2 miles long. I'm like, God damn, he had everybody name up in there.
Put everything in there.
Man, he said Beethoven, Kamal Franklin, Wu-Tang Clan, Jimmy Iovine. I'm like, hold on. But anyway, yeah, so where can folks get copies of the books? Where can they
So yeah, the film, I mean, the books are supposed to be available. Like you can order it at, through Barnes and Noble and see it first before you buy it. But the Tupac book is at independent stores. It's not at places like Barnes and Noble. But you can also get it through me at johnpotash.com or FBIWarOnTupac.com. But Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the film is available on a lot of platforms. It's available on Amazon Prime and a number of other places. The book is, I say, a number of bookstores, Drugs as Weapons, or you can get it through me at johnpotash.com. And FBI War on Tupac, both book and film, you can get at johnpotash.com. Amazon, for some reason, is barred my Tupac film. I don't know why. They were selling a lot of it for a while, and now they somehow won't let me sell it anymore. It's really bizarre. They act like it's out of stock, and they won't let me stock it up again. It's been a year or so. So I'm thinking about it. I let it be free for about 3 years. I let everyone see it for free, and you know, some of those YouTube versions of it, to the hour and a half film, got about over 1 million views. But at a certain point, I thought, well, I really should try to sell this because make the money back, because it did cost a lot of money to make, of course. But now with Amazon barring it, I might try to get it out there another way. But you can get it from me from my website for sure, and I'll send it to you.
Sounds good.
A minimum fee.
We're gonna have you come back on. Definitely. We appreciate you coming through. And you're from like the drug capital of the East Coast, right? Baltimore?
Baltimore, yeah.
Hey, man, I see why you talking about, the war on, how this whole drug war and everything. So that's a real interesting piece. We got to talk about that.
Yeah, the guy that wrote The Wire was working in Baltimore City at the same time as I was doing drug counseling, so I knew his stories before I saw him in The Wire. I heard from people, from a lot of people there, yeah. That's
heavy. We definitely appreciate you coming on Renegade Culture.
Thank you, John. Yeah, Great. It was real good information, things for people to chew on and talk about and debate over even, you know what I mean? So yeah, we really think it was a good show, man.
Thanks a lot. It was great. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Indeed. Take it easy. We're going to go to this, no doubt. We're going to go to this quick break. Renegade Culture. Our guest was John Potash. And, definitely make sure you pick up his film, pick up the book. And, sometimes the water's cold when you hear it from the white dude. So we glad the white dude today is on the right side of history. Anyway, take it easy, John. We'll be back at you.
Right. Renegade Culture.
Renegade Culture in the building.
Separating gods from the nigga men, separating chicken heads from the heroines. They tell me constantly that I should change my content. You're just too conscious, maybe you should narrow in. Rhyme more about that street like heroin. Make it amplify, glorify the hell you're in. But where the hell you been? Clearly you don't know me then. Spit flame, ethanol, Jada Pinkett set it off.
Woo! Okay. Not playing some joints tonight.
No. Who's that artist?
Nairubi Selah. She's I think Nairubi's out of New York, correct?
Yeah.
She's out of New York. She's actually a high school principal. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
Dope artist. Yeah, but so we had John Potash on the interview tip. That was a real heavy joint right there.
I know, man. I couldn't get enough jokes in, particularly when you talked about your run-in with the new Black Panther Party.
I was like, it's the first time that was mentioned on this show, whatever. We usually limit our clown intake on which clowns we talk about and which ones we don't. So I usually don't talk about them punk motherfuckers. But shout out to them. They can eat a dick sandwich. How
Oh,
about
goddamn. No.
yeah, since we are talking about it.
I know. Since he did say something, now you got to let it all go.
He did say it. Let me just say that.
Major right now.
Huh?
I said you popping that major yang right now.
Oh, no doubt, man. Heavy on the mayo with that sandwich for him.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So,
man, John put out some, like you said. I mean, some of that stuff I've never heard of.
yes.
Like when he said that they killed my man Biggie to cover up Tupac. So
yes.
I gotta go pick up the book so I can run through it and I got a lot of questions and shit like that. But it was some interesting information and shit he put out there, and some of it obviously all of us already know some of the parts of that history,
right?
And can say that the FBI and the COINTELPRO and CIA have definitely obviously been assassins and killers of leadership all over the world. So there's no reason to think that they couldn't do it. The things that he said, but I think he made some very serious charges. People should go pick up the book and read through it and find out, if they can validate some of the things that this man said. In
fact, he referred to Biggie's murder as collateral damage. You know what I mean?
Which is crazy because Biggie's was of course the better lyricist. So
Yeah, we about to go.
Yeah, we lost with Biggie.
That real now.
I'm just saying. I'm just trying to bring up a point.
We love Biggie. Shout out to Biggie and Pop.
Better lyricists ain't had the best content.
Yeah, he was the best rapper of all time. But that's I'm just saying.
Yeah. Lyricists, but not
you shouldn't treat a man like that as collateral damage. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, keeping it real, we love Biggie, but Biggie was saying some real suspect shit too. You know what I'm saying?
I'm just not going to mention it. We're
not going to mention it on this show right here.
Fuck y'all.
Yeah,
fuck y'all.
Whatever.
Brooklyn's in the house. Fuck y'all.
Yeah, whatever. I ain't gonna say F Brooklyn because I know you're not from there.
Yo, did you get him? Did you get John Renegade Culture T-shirt?
Yeah, he'll get one.
Oh, you gonna get one? Did you get yours, Naka?
You see I got another dashiki on.
Know what I'm saying? My Chango over here, motherfucker still ain't come through with my T-shirt. You know what I'm saying?
Yo, can y'all see this?
Probably sold him for that denim jacket he got.
I know.
Looking like Duran. We out of here, man.
Yo, Renegade Culture. We be back next week, yo.
Yes. Peace. Said Duran. Oh, look at him shirt.